Today is the what I call the special. So this is 1.5 hour, and today we are on the two centenaries. China talk about the two centenaries. Actually, one has gone, and then we'll be looking at the second one. Okay. It refers to two 100 years anniversaries. The first one is the centenary of the formation of the CCP, or more accurately, CPC, Communist Party of China in 2021, which is actually the 1st of July. So that has gone and passed. At which point a full Xiuhong society would have been achieved. What is meant by Xiuhong means moderately well off. It's a relatively abstract theory rooted in both Confucianism and the socialist ideology. The party has allied this in objective quantitative terms, a doubling of the 2010 per capita income figures. So that is their definition. And then the second 100-year anniversaries refer to the founding of the People's Republic of China in 2049. So we are still 29 years from the second 100 years anniversary, at which point China will become a strong, democratic, civilized, harmonious, and modern socialist country. So each of these adjectives have some meaning. Okay. Strong, meaning China will no longer be bullied by any foreign powers. Democratic, the Chinese version of democratic is quite different from the Western understanding of the word democratic. Now, in the Western understanding, we refer to a democratic as a political system formed by election. But the Chinese version of the democratic system is a system of government which the people becomes the master, and the government will respond to the needs of the people. So there is obviously a large difference between these two ideas. One of the fundamental ideas is that a elected government is not necessarily responding to the needs of the people. So the method of forming a government is not the same as a good government. So we cannot equate good government as forming a government by election. So that is the Chinese understanding of it. Civilized means the Chinese society will resume its leadership in a civilized life as in the past almost 2,000 years, except the last 300 years. Chinese stress a lot about a harmonious society, meaning in a society, everybody get together and then cooperate, rather than a society in which we have different factions fighting against each other. And the last modern socialist, that means you will acquire some Confucianism ideas. So that part I will go into it a little bit later on. Now this 100 years actually was articulated in the 50th Party Congress. Now, the highest political power in China is National Party Congress. So this is the 15th Party Congress is held in 1997, and that was during the term of Jiang Zemin. And that term, they calculated that we want to work hard towards 100 years anniversary. The first one is, of course, the establishment of the party. And the second one is the establishment of the People's Republic of China. So they articulate what they want to do in order to achieve the objectives for these two special dates. Back to Xiu Kong's. This is a Chinese version of it. I'm going to translate this one sentence by sentence in the following slides. So let's do this. And I will skip the Chinese part and then we'll concentrate on the English translation. But just a word is in the Chinese part, there are some words in black and some words in blue. The words in black comes directly from the dialects, the Confucian's classic. And the words in blue is a modern translation of the ideas of the words that is represented in the classic terms. So we talk about a great way. We talk about that when the great way disappear, all this under the heaven, that means the country, belongs to families. State ownership by families all work for their own families' self-interest, not the interest of the public. People are still kind and respect their parents. They take care of their own children. Resources and exertions are all for own interests. That is the current state. Presumably, it's also the current state in our modern Western societies as well. Okay, but from the Chinese point of view, these have already lost the great way. So we are now working for ourselves. Although we are kind to each other, we respect each other, but we take care of our own children, look after ourselves, and all the resources and the wealth belong to ourselves. And then here talk about the kings, the nobles, the official positions are passed on from father to son or to brothers. Now this is of course different now. In the old days when we have that emperor, the emperor passed on his position, is thrown to the emperor's, one of their children, one of the emperor's children. Okay, so it's father to son or to brothers. Hereditary successions are institutionalized. Of course, today we have the successions institutionalized by election, but in the old days, this is usually depending on your relationship, the blood relationship with the emperor. Outer city walls, moats, and inner city walls are built to fortify one's position. So we have our homes, which is fortified to avoid being invaded by other people. So are your cities, etc. We have boundaries, like which is a ceremonial rituals or how you treat each other. And yi is a principle of right conducts. So there are two ideas here. One is li, li. One is yi, yi. They become rules and norms to guide the relationship between kings and subjects, between father and son, between elder brother and younger brother, between husband and wife, etc., etc. So we are now under the rule of some law, okay, rule of law. We have some rituals, how we treat each other, greet each other. We have conventions, how we deal with each other. And then we also have the principle of right conduct. That means we know what we should do, and we know that doing that is the right way. But these are explicit rules. Li and yi become social institutes. Just as today, we normally will greet each other with saying hello, friend, kindly and respectively. And then what we do is ruled by the law. Okay, these are social institutes which has been built into our system. And for the establishment of drilling and English rules. So our property rights are being delineated by law. People are known for their courage and capabilities. People claim credits for themselves. So you are doing something good, people know that. And that is one of the driving force for people to work for other people. Now, this is still not the ideal system. This is when the great way is lost. This is a longer version, so I separate out the Chinese with the English. Therefore, skimming becomes commonplace. So we are always calculating and working, making sure we maximize our benefits or our profits. Wars follow. When we have conflicts, then we'll have war. Then they refer to several of the first kings in the Chinese history. Yu, Kang, King Wen, King Wu, and King Chen, and the Duke and the region of Zhao were the noted representatives of this system. So under their rule, the Chinese society was prospering, and we know what to do. Everybody is behaving properly. All that is under the heaven belongs to some families. Unfortunately, the whole country belonged to the emperor, i.e. Private ownership. These six gentlemen, these six kings referred above, were all adherents of Lai. So they respect the rituals between each other. They emphasize the people the correct behavior according to Lai. They teach people how to behave. They examine people's worthiness according to Lai. They look at whether you are trustworthy depending on how you behave. They punish those who misbehaved according to the rules of Lai. Again, rule of law. If you break the law, you are being punished. They adopted Ren as a guiding principle. Ren, this is a very difficult word to translate into English. In the Chinese original word, we have the man on one side and the number two on the other side. So two people. So that would represent how can you're sorry, my wife is correcting my pronunciation. We are talking about the relationship of two people. How can you behave towards each other? They promoted courteous deference between people. They established Lai as a constant rule and regulation for the people. Those who do not follow Lai, even of high positions, will be removed. They will be considered a public disaster. This is called the little prosperity, or Xiu Hong, which is the current state the Chinese state has achieved at the moment. So Xiu Hong is not the ideal system for Chinese. It is only an intermediate step. The next step is we want to be even better than this. So let's look at what have been achieved so far. The first thing of note is the eradication of the extreme poverty. Okay, now I emphasize this extreme poverty. It doesn't mean that in China there's no poor people, but those who are extremely poor has been eradicated. Now in this curve, you notice that the bars had changed a couple of times because the so-called poverty line has also changed. The first part, the dark blue, is the poverty line divided in 1978. And then the light blue, the middle part, is the poverty line defined in 2008. So we know that means in the 2008 definition, those who previously were not considered as poor has been included as poor. So the poverty line actually increases. And then finally, there is another revision in 2010. At the moment, the Chinese government claimed that there is no more extreme people left in China in December 2020. So they claim that extreme poverty has been eliminated. I think in the bulk part that might be true, but I would still think there might be pockets of very remote places where people might be still fall under this poverty line, but they shouldn't be of a large number. I still believe that there will be a small pocket of these people like that, but again, I have no data to support that. The Chinese government data say they had eliminated all extreme poverty cases. So moving ahead, looking into the second 100 years. In order to become a strong country, now at the moment, China is the largest industrial country in the world. It is the #1 trading countries in the world. And many countries treated China as the major trading partners. But China has been moving from a labor-intensive, low-skill, low-technology industry. It is now wanting to move into the upper rank of that value chain. So they put forward the idea of Made in China 2020. This idea is they want to upgrade the Chinese industry into a more high-tech industry. But unfortunately, this idea has been a source of attack by the established countries. So initially, it was a national strategic plan, and the industrial policy of the industrial policy, right, to further develop the manufacturing sector, issued by the current Premier Li Keqiang in May 2015. The stated goals is to increase the Chinese domestic content of core material to 40% by 2020, 70% by 2025. We know that the Chinese manufactures a lot of things for the world. Many of these manufacturing is actually assembling. That means they are taking parts from one country, import that parts, for example, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Japan, from Korea. Okay, they import core materials, and they assemble it together and then send it out. For example, we know that Apple products are all assembled in China. So in an Apple product, we have the screen, we have the CPU, we have the memory, we have the battery, etc., etc. All these core materials, most of them were imported into China. China only do the assembly. In terms of doing the assembly, for example, in a Apple Watch, China typically earn about $2 to $3 US dollars per watch, when the watch is selling at around $400. So that means the assembly itself only generate about occupy about 1% of the value of the watch itself. So Charlie said, okay, in that case, what is the cost of making the watch? We have the screen, we have the memory, we have the CPU, etc., etc. So China want to say, okay, in order to make more money, we have to increase these expensive parts and then let these parts be produced by China in order to move up the technology ladder. So these are the objectives: 40% by 2020, which was last year, and then by 2025, 70%. To help achieve independence from foreign suppliers, the initiative encourages increased production in high-tech products and services, with its semiconductor central to the industrial plan, partly because advances in chip technology may lead to breakthroughs in other areas of technology, handing the advantage to whoever who has the best chips, an advantage that currently is out of Beijing's reach. We know that one of the major trade war initiated by US towards China is also this technology war. For example, one of the telecom company, Huawei is blocked by acquiring advanced semiconductor chips from any US technology, making them suffer quite a bit at the moment. Since 2018, following a backlash from the US, Europe, and elsewhere, the phrase "Made in China 2025" has been de-emphasized in government and other official communications. While the program remains in place, the Chinese government continues to invest heavily in identified technologies. In 2018, the Chinese government committed to invest roughly $300 billion into achieving its industrial plan. In the wake of the COVID-19, at least additional $1.4 billion was also invested in Make in China 2025 initiatives. So again, like our government, after the COVID, the government wants to stimulate the economy. So instead of giving money to every citizen, the Chinese government chose to increase investment in development of key technology. I think we have been noting a lot talking about the Chinese crackdown on the tech giants. Of course, the tech giants meaning the tech giants within China. So let's listen to a discussion of this idea.
Good to have you. I find this interesting, especially in the context of the crackdown that we see in China, which one I suppose might interpret as China trying to keep its most powerful tech companies from getting that sort of sovereignty or nation state power. Is that the way you'd look at it?
It's absolutely China looking at what's happening in the West and the United States and worrying that that is happening in China as well, and they don't like it. Because as you know, these technology companies, private sector companies, both in the United States and overwhelmingly in China, they create their walled gardens from the ground up, the rule set, the architecture, the algorithms. And from the perspectives of the government, what happens is kind of a black box, right? So the United States, I mean, if you think about both what happened after January 6th, overwhelmingly, it was decisions taken by technology companies that determine the political outcomes, not by the government. How about response to the biggest attack on the United States and its allies last year, SolarWinds? Government didn't even know about it. Those private sector companies that found out and then also were able to determine a response. Mm-hmm. China looks at that at a place where the government's supposed to be, you know, the be all and end all, and they're deeply uncomfortable with the idea that some of the companies that are driving the greatest profit, the greatest innovation, and the most interaction with Chinese citizens are fundamentally unknown to what the Chinese Communist Party is all about. So there's no question. The big piece of this is them driving that. Yeah.
Now to the mechanics of it, it seems to me that democracy is wonderful, but it's messy by design. autocracies are a lot less messy, whether you're talking about China or you're talking about companies, right? Which largely are not democratic. They don't take a vote from their employees before deciding what to do, clearly based on what we're seeing happen now. So what happens to democracy when big tech companies that are autocracies start to have such big influence or continue to have such a big influence over global society?
Well, I'm not willing to say that all corporations are autocratic, but certainly they do not have their own rule of law or social contract with citizens. And so what I guess I'm saying is that increasingly the United States is becoming a hybrid system where if you exist in the physical world, you have laws that apply to you and you have a judiciary that metes out whether or not it's being broken by the US government that you vote for or vote against, but you're part of that process. Where in the digital world, the virtual world, which is increasingly a large part of the economy, increasingly a large part of our social interactions, where we get information from, increasingly a large part even of our personal and national security, actually the government doesn't exercise sovereignty over that space. These corporations do. And the rules that the corporations apply to those virtual spaces are determined by those corporations. And, you know, that's a radically different place than we've ever existed before, either as citizens or consumers.
Okay, so he is talking about sovereignty. Okay, the sovereignty in our physical world. We live in Australia. We are under the sovereign government, sovereignty of our federal government. Our behavior is controlled or limited by laws established by our sovereign government. But in the virtual space, like Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, etc., in this virtual space, the government has no sovereignty. And the Chinese government said no. If this kind of company operating in China, then the sovereignty belongs to the Chinese government, and therefore Chinese government need to be able to control the virtual space as well as the physical space, and therefore there are actions taken. The main action taken is actually about our data. At the moment, we are asking for example, our data privacy. We don't want our consumer behavior, the data that generated by our consuming or buying habits. These data are being collected, but who owns this data? Should the company which collects this data owns the data, or should the data be owned by the national government, our sovereign government? So that is the question. And the Chinese say, no, we believe that that data belongs to the government, not to the private individual companies. So that is one of the main issues about crackdown of this tech giant. So that is quite different from what the West, our country, like Australia, is doing. Our government is doing nothing about the virtual space, mostly. Now, the other idea is talking about common prosperity. That means now that we have no extreme poverty. So the next idea is that we will ask the rich, those who becomes wealthy at the early stage of this Chinese development, to help the less fortunate, the currently still poor people, to have a better life, to raise the common wealth of everybody. So this is the idea of whether we are looking at a bigger cake. We want to make the cake bigger and bigger, but at the same time, we want to be able to divide the cake in a more equitable way. So at the moment, for example, we know that in America, for example, during the pandemic, the richest 0.1%, their wealth ballooned by $2.3 trillion, whereas the bottom 99% didn't get much of the stimulus. So that is the issue. Yes, the government is making the cake bigger, but when you make the cake bigger, you also need to make sure the cake is divided into different stakeholders equitably, and that is the question Chinese want to address as well. This is where they talk about the common prosperity. They want to divide the cake in a better way.
China has recently redoubled its efforts to achieve common prosperity, and people are talking about it all over China and elsewhere. At the same time, China has stepped up efforts to regulate internet companies' monopoly conduct and to govern the entertainment business. As always, some foreign media have begun to look for clandestine motives behind these moves. Regulating any monopoly or disorderly or unregulated financial conduct is a standard approach in the international community. It's also one of the ways to help China realize its goal of common prosperity. However, equating common prosperity with clamping down on tycoon companies and the rich is a misguided step that blurs the real picture. Certain foreign media have even used expressions like tightening control and neo-populism in their coverage, demonstrating a failure to understand why China has set this goal in the first place. China is a socialist country for which realizing common prosperity is an essential goal. Common prosperity doesn't mean removing all income gaps among people, but putting an end to wealth polarization and letting everyone live a reasonable, prosperous life. In other words, common prosperity should neither be prosperity for the minority, nor prosperity with growing internal gaps. Many have noticed that on the Hurun Global Rich List 2021, there are over 1,000 individuals from China with an asset value of over $1 billion US. Some Chinese actors can earn about $25 million US for starring in a TV series. At the same time, around 600 million Chinese people live on about $156 US every month, according to official data. Like many other developing countries, China's income structure takes the form of a pyramid, with a wealthy elite at the apex, while the great majority belong to low-income groups. Therefore, achieving common prosperity means forming a stable olive-shaped structure, not by cutting off the tip of the pyramid, but by increasing the income of those at the bottom, then enlarging the middle-income demographic. Not long ago, the 10th meeting of China's Central Committee for Financial and Economic Affairs also offers solutions, providing more equitable conditions for people to enjoy better education so that more people can climb the social ladder, and supporting small and medium-sized enterprises so that more people can increase their income by starting their own business and working hard. Compared to some developed countries, China's ability to adjust taxation and social welfare is not so strong and less easily targeted. Therefore, by improving institutions and providing fairer public services like elderly care, medical care, and housing, middle and low-income groups can have their standard of living guaranteed and enjoy more equitable wealth distribution. In light of this, it's easier to understand why, in hindsight, China has taken strict measures to regulate the market and clamp down on conduct including tax evasion, unchecked capital expansion, and unfair competition among e-commerce platforms such as forced exclusive cooperation. All these are to sustain a healthy economic development while enabling people to share social resources and development dividends in a more reasonable way. For decades, China made enormous social and economic progress through the hard work, innovation, and pioneering spirit of the Chinese people, and it would be illogical for China to stifle such trends. For the same reason, the dividends of development should be shared by every Chinese. Achieving common prosperity and letting people share the fruits of development, these are goals to which China is fully dedicated. I'm Sun Wanlu in Beijing. Thank you for watching.
So the idea of common prosperity is not living constraining the wealthy people by acquiring more wealth, but about sharing the wealth so that the whole society benefit. How to do that? Okay, so we talk about the income redistribution, okay, or wealth distribution. When we have wealth distribution, the first wealth distribution is of course our wages. We work, we obtain a wage, and the wage is a distribution of the value generated by the works and with our co-workers. For example, you work in a factory, so you are one part of the whole factory, but you get a share of the value generated by the factory through your wage. So that is the first distribution of value. The second distribution of value, we usually call it the redistribution of wealth, is through taxation. Most countries, including our country, will tax the high income group higher than the low income group. We even have a tax threshold. If your income is below a certain value, we actually don't tax them. The money collected through tax is used back into the society through, for example, Medicare, through police, through infrastructure building, etc., etc. Okay, so in one way, values are being collected in a disproportionate way. Low-income people do not contribute much, but the high-income people contribute more. So we collect this together and then we distribute into the whole society. So that is referred to as the second wealth distribution. And of course, in our society, we have also the third method of wealth distribution, which is through the voluntary welfare organizations. We have different, for example, our Melbourne Hospital, or different social clubs will. UVA is another example. Okay, we are redistributing through our voluntary work, or in some other case, through your voluntary contribution to do something good for some other people. For example, we may contribute to the Royal Children's Hospital. Well, at our age, we don't benefit, but we contributed back because knowing we contribute that back, our children or grandchildren may benefit in the future. So that is the third way of wealth distribution, using our voluntary mechanism. So when we talk about common prosperity, we have to look at the first, the wage distribution, the second, the taxation system, the third, well, the voluntary organizations which help to make the society much more equitable. There are three different ways to do it. And Chinese government will not hesitate to use all the tools available to make sure that the wealth are being distributed more equitably. As described in the in the video, the Chinese want to have the wealth distribution in a olive shape with a middle being the bulk of the people who are in the middle income group. A little bit of very wealthy people and a little bit of very poor people. Now, the little bit of poor people is unavoidable because we have different circumstances, we have different talents, we are born unequal to different conditions. Some people are unfortunate. So we have a low income group. We want to keep the low income group as small as possible, whereas we want to make the middle part as big as possible. Of course, we have some extraordinary people who make a lot of money. That's fine. Let them make a lot of money, no problem. But we want to make the middle part as large as possible. At the moment, it is estimated that China have about 400 million people falling into the middle range group, the middle class. But that only represents about 30% of the Chinese population. In the 1970s to 1980s, in America, about 75% are in the middle class. So China still have a lot of potential to grow to the standard living in the 70s and 80s in America. When, for example, when Chinese middle class double from 400 million to 800 million, then you will achieve about 60 to 70% of the people in the middle class. That is a goal the Chinese government want to achieve, is to increase its middle class population size. Okay, so how are they doing that? Let me quote from Martin Jacks, who is a English, a historian from United Kingdom. This is a direct quote from him. China is constantly underestimated in the West. The two latest initiatives, Taming the Tech Company and the Common Prosperity, are of huge significance for China and also for the West. They have received little coverage, yet they are two of the most important reforms of the Xi era, meaning Xi Jinping's era. They are a reminder of the sheer dynamism of the Chinese governance that lies behind the country's transformation. Take tech regulation. Taming tech is a crucial issue for China and the United States. In the United States, there has been zero action. In China, they will now be subjected to heavy regulation. So we make sure that the tech giants are obeying the physical laws, for example, privacy law. Or take common prosperity, i.e. inequality, now a huge problem in China as it is in US and the West. China is now acting on a broad front, and the US, so far virtually nothing. As in the UK, in China, we are seeing the end of the era in which the rich were placed on a pedestal. The contest between the United States and China is not just economic, technological, or military. It is about which society is best able to respond to the challenges and the needs of the 21st century. America is in a state of partial paralysis, which threatens to get worse. It is no longer seen by the world as embodying the future. In the ferocious Cold War assault on China, the West is engaged in self-deception. China is hugely dynamic. The US once was, but is no more. Okay, I think we may find this large paragraph a little bit unsettling, but anyway, that is from Martin Jacks. So in order to do that, what China can do? Okay, we know that at the moment there is the income inequality in China is very much geographically distributed. In the eastern coast, the rich cities are there, including Shanghai, Beijing, Hangzhou, or Guangdong, etc. These are all along the coast. The poor region is in the west, in the rural area. The income between the cities and the rural area is about 2 to 1. That means on average, a worker working in the city may earn, say, $100, but the same worker in the rural area doing about the same job will only earn 50. So that is the current disparity that is due to the geographic locations, because of job opportunities, because of all kinds of different issues. So the Chinese government said, okay, what we want to do is revitalize the rural area. We develop the rural area so that the rural area becomes more prosperous, so that the rural area is able to provide a better salary to the workers, so that they don't have to go to the East Coast in order to work to make a living. They can find the same job with the similar wages in their local area. So we need to do a rural development. So the highlight of that is looking at the women's health, the rural bank to help investment, small investment, increase subsidies for rural medical schemes. Typically in the more rural areas, the government haven't got sufficient money to provide better medical system, then the central government will subsidize this in order to provide a better medical system. Upgrade 270,000 kilometers of highway. The Chinese always believe that one of the reasons of poverty is because of disconnectedness to the rest of the world. So if you get the rural area connected to the whole China, then the produce from that little region can be sold to everybody in China, and therefore demanding a better price, and therefore you get a better income. So a physical connection is very important. And of course, we have to do research, look at how we can do that, and then also build up some think tank in order to make the people living, choosing to live in rural areas happier, attract more people to move to the rural area. But actually, in terms of developments, the Chinese is more inclined to increase the urban populations. Recent years, we have seen some solid progress in China's pursuit of the rural revitalization. It was proposed in the 19th National Congress in 2017, and it started to release a package of policies in 2018. The timetable required that by 2020, the rural revitalization strategy should have established an institutional framework and policy system. That means before 2020, the Chinese rural strategy, the institutional framework or policy is poverty elimination. But since they claim that there's no more extreme poor people, so the same workforce is now switched focus into making the rural area more attractive for people to live in. And hopefully by 2035, a decisive progress will have been made with basic modernization, agriculture, and rural area achieved. all Chinese people, whether in cities or rural area, will have equal access to basic public services. Urban and rural integration will have improved. And then by 2050, rural areas should have a robust agricultural, beautiful landscapes and prosperous farmers. So because it's more about agriculture, so the task fall into the Ministry of Agriculture. And just last month, they have 4 key tasks. First, the country will improve its supplies of grain and other important agricultural products, focusing on the seed industry and the arable land. The second will be done to improve the rural industries, such as agricultural product processing industry, to create more jobs. Third, water, logistic, power supply, transport infrastructure upgraded in order to provide better integration of the industry and the farming. And then, of course, we have to upgrade the rural public education, hospital, cultural services, and then, of course, boost the rural governance. Every year, China will restart its number of central documents with 1, and almost every year, the number 1 document is always focused on agriculture and rural area. So after removing the impoverished counties, now it set up a 5-year plan to transition those into a modernist society. I'm not going to into details that one, because I want also talk about another big issue which haven't been talked about before, is the education reform. We know we have the so-called tigress mother. The Chinese mothers push their children very hard, and the government say, no, it's too hard now. We need to switch ideas. So the first idea is education is not business. Okay, education is education. So it banned all for-profit tutoring services. Okay, and then all institutions related to education will not be able to do IPO, cannot do financial what's that term? Trying to get investors into your education business. No, education is not business. So you are not going to attract investors. So no IPO. English language education, which once was prioritized, will be taken into the back seat. Okay. The Chinese children will learn at least 2 languages. One is, of course, Chinese. The second is their mother tongue. For example, you are in Tibet, you speak Tibetan, then you learn Tibetan. Okay, so you will need learn your mother tongue. So that is the minimum 2 languages the children need to learn. Okay, and then for those children who would like to increase more language exposure, they will learn a 3rd foreign language, whatever they choose. Now, previously, most of that is English, but the Chinese is now putting English not as a compulsory subject for the 3rd language. You can choose anything. And then also make sure that the education technology firms will not survive. They are killing all the education firms, which is bad for me. Will regulate off-campus tutoring service. No more private firms doing that. The new regulation ban local officials from approving new private education companies. No private education companies. All education institutions is either state-owned or non-profit. Okay. They can register as non-profit entities, okay? And there's also pushing the so-called double reduction. But unfortunately, the double reduction means increase of the workload of the teachers. The double reduction policy is to reduce students' amount of homework and after-school training classes. Reduce test pressure so that the schools are not allowed to advertise their examination results. The national examination results, they are not allowed to advertise, so that the school are on more equal terms. The average student workload will be reduced so that they actually set a limit, 60 minutes per day, or at most 90 minutes per day for junior high students. That's the maximum amount of homework required. Cannot set up advanced classes in compulsory education schools. Why are these changes made? The Chinese government hopes that by reducing the emphasis placed on exams and written homework at young ages, students will be free from pressure to place all their focus, time, energy, and money on simply getting grades. Hopefully, this will help them develop healthier lifestyles by getting more sleep and exploring more activities, as well as reduce the pressure on the parents to pay for the classes for the kids to keep up with. Okay, so that is, I deliberately make this about 1 hour in my presentation, leave some time for discussion. But before we do that, I would like you to do a little bit of homework for next week. I would like you to Google our ABC and find this article, why Chinese citizens support COVID-0, even if it means being cut off from family. Because next week we'll be talking about the Chinese zero tolerance to COVID versus our policy of coexisting with COVID. So these are two contrasting views. So if you can do it. The URL is here. I will share this URL on chat so that you don't want to do a search, you can easily do that through the chat system. So let me find where is the other screen. No, not this screen. Okay, anyway, I'm going to stop the share and then we can have discussion. And you want to discuss, just unmute yourself, and I'm going to paste that information into the chat area so that you can download the article if you like. Okay, any question or any discussions people like to ask?
Yes, Albert, I've got a question.
Yes, please.
Actually, it would help if you're able to or wouldn't mind putting up that second last slide about education. That was quite staggering, the extent to which the Chinese government is suppressing any attempt at people getting together in the way of extra education.
Okay. Let me just put it up.
Yeah, so I was just while you're putting it up, I'll just ask the question: is that really feasible? I mean, the reason I ask this is that it seems to me that you know, a lot of people at least have a really strong motivation to educate their children and to, you know, obviously with the hope of getting them good professions and so forth. And so is that sustainable? Is that practical for them to do this, given people's strong motivation? And, you know, will they really be able to stop people doing it in their homes and, you know, in places like that?
Well, the Chinese system is quite different. The school starts very early, and there's a lot of boarding schools in China. So you basically, if you are living in a remote area, you send your kids to the school maybe early in the Monday morning, and then you won't see your kids back until late Friday afternoon. And sometimes you have to send your children to school on Sunday night, and then you get your children back on Saturday morning, something like that. So the children's, a lot of children is already living in school, staying with the school. And sometimes, for example, if you are in a city, the parents might go to the school, collect the student out, say at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, send them to some private tuitions for 2 or 3 hours before you send the kids back to school. That is both very exhaustive to the parents and expensive as well. And this is where the Chinese want to crack down on. They don't want to do that anymore. They want the children to have a happy life instead of being pushed along by their tigress mothers or fathers. Having said that, I also acknowledge that there are children who are exceptionally good at something. For example, in the last Olympics, remember China have a 10 meters platform diver. She won gold with out of her five jumps, 3 were 10 points, full mark. Okay, she is obviously an exceptional diver, but she is still a school age children. I think she is now 14, so she should be in school. But at this level of competition, most of her time, probably about 5 hours or 4 hours every day, will be spent in a swimming pool diving. And therefore, for this kind of children, I think the Chinese government need to come up with another mechanism, both educating them so that when they finish their career, for example, in diving, they will be able to live as a normal citizen within the Chinese society. So how do we equip these people so that they have a life after their career? Some, for example, gymnastics, diving, and a lot of athletics people, their athletic career is pretty short term. Maybe they finish their career at 20, 30. Some lucky one may extend to 40. And after that, how they sustain their life. So I think the Chinese government need to consider this as well. But I haven't seen any document saying how Chinese government is doing that. But I do understand that, for example, that Olympian, she is being taken out from school, being trained at the province level team. And she trained about 4 hours per day in diving. And the rest of the time, she have special tutor to teach her all the other academic works that normal children have. So yeah. I think I think the Chinese education system need to have this another branch which allow the exception students to perform to their best potential. And that also set in the other end of the scale, those who are unable to catch up with normal progress, a little bit, say, have different kind of learning disabilities, they might have been slower, then we also need to provide another track for these students to actually still able to learn something in order for them to become a full citizens later in life. So I haven't seen that yet. So I'm looking forward to finding something like that. If I can find something, I will share it with everybody sometime later on.
Could you go to the previous slide, please, Albert?
Okay, this one's the previous slide. This one? Or this one? This is the part which I talk about the double reduction. Okay, here. This one. Is that?
Yes, education is not a business. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one where I think that's the one where they talked about not doing it in homes or cafes or anything.
Here, banning all the private schools from doing all sort of tutoring. So they don't want the student to be pushed by the tigress mother.
They banned them from cafes and things like that. I'm just thinking about the case of someone who needs some extra help to, they're struggling a bit, so they just need some extra help to try and perform reasonably well, and
Yep.
be the case of people who are maybe gifted and really need some special help because they're only being given that middle of the range material in the normal education, and they really need, because of their talent, they really need to have extra opportunities to receive some advanced tuition, and that seems to be prohibited by the government.
Yeah, at the moment it seems to be prohibited, but I do know that these things do happen in China. So what kind of mechanism through what mechanism are these children being picked out from the normal group and then provide them with special services on both ends? As you say, some students might not be following it well because of learning disabilities. Some are gifted, they want to progress faster. So I do know that there are the tracks on both ends, but I haven't seen the official documents how that track is being established. I think that track might be established through the government non-profit part. But I don't have an answer for that one. But you are absolutely correct. The government need to look at the both ends, because common education is only providing for the middle students.
Yes, it seems like it's going to be difficult to really enforce, and B, it's going to really not allow for the different range of needs of different people.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't got an answer. Sorry for that.
All right, thanks, Albert.
Yeah, welcome. Yes, Clifton? Is that Clifton?
Albert, on a different subject earlier in the lecture, you mentioned 400 million people in China in the middle class,
Yeah,
which is about 30%. But do you have the figures for the lower class and upper class, or would you split into a fourth class rather than three classes? Or
I don't have the exact data on the wealth distribution. The 400 million is only I got it from the news. They are now reporting that the Chinese middle class has a population larger than the population of United States. The United States have a population of about 350 million people, and they are quoting 400 million middle class in China. But I will try to get this data and then we'll present to you next week.
thank you very much.
So the wealth distribution in China.
The Chinese government banned children from playing video games for more than 1 hour a day as well.
No, it's not 1 hour a day. It's 2 hours per week.
2 hours a week. Oh.
Albert, going back a little bit, when you were talking about developing programs with agriculture and services, or developing rural services, I noticed something about a Sino-German program. I wonder, could you talk more about that?
I have to do research before I can talk about that. It's only that I don't know. I know one thing is China is cooperating with Israel in a lot of agricultural projects, but I didn't know that China and Germany were cooperating. So I need to do a bit research to do that, because you know in China there is Sino-Germany research on the rural. Okay, because you know, for example, in Xinjiang and Tibet, China is very dry because it's just on the other side of the Himalaya. When the monsoon winds blow inwards, inland, all the rainfall on the Indian peninsula on the Indian part. So once it's over the Himalaya, it's become dry. So in order to make that area also usable, they need method of using minimum water in order to grow. So I know they have a lot of projects with Israel. Israel is very good in terms of that. But I didn't know that they were having a lot of research with German. So I will find that out, and then hopefully next time I can fill you in with some of the things I can find.
All right. Thanks, Albert.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, please.
Albert, regarding the crackdown on the tutoring schools, how's this going to affect the people that go to school to learn English before they come out overseas for classes to Australia or America or the UK, or will they be caught up in the schools teaching English?
No, they won't speak. Now, first of all, the schools in China is huge, okay?
Yeah.
A normal school, they are talking about 5,000 people, 5,000 students and so. So the school will offer a lot of foreign languages.
Yep.
And if the children want to go abroad or do something, they can select that as their third language to learn.
But isn't it some of the people who before they come out to university do a sort of a 3 months to 6 months course, because there's a difference between English and being able to express yourself in technical papers and so forth.
Yeah,
I was wondering if, and some of these are sort of provided by the universities out here. They've got colleges over there as well.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they're going to be caught up in this.
Oh, obviously the Chinese rule only applies in China. we can still provide for-profit services to Chinese students, okay?
Right.
The rules doesn't apply outside of China, okay? So that's one. Therefore, our university still is able to recruit students from China as a pre-university course, etc., to learn language. But in China, I do know that the children can learn a third language. Yep. If they choose to. And obviously, if their parents have the intention to send their children abroad for studying, they probably will ask the student to choose that third language in order to prepare themselves. And then the level of this third language is pretty high as well. Some of the schools do very well in. You will be amazed in the cities how many children can speak English.
Oh yes, no.
Yeah, there's a lot of good English speaking children in China as well. But probably the idea is now don't emphasize English too much. They want them to have a broader range, including other languages.
I'm wondering if that will also go for the street signs, because in the major cities, a lot of the street signs are both in Chinese and in English.
And if you are going to the rural area, it is more than just English and Chinese. They have the local languages as well. For example, you're in Xinjiang, you will see the Xinjiang language. The Chinese is very good in more than one languages. Even in the Chinese money, they have 5 different languages on it: Chinese, English, and then Tibet, Xinjiang, and one more. I definitely know that the Chinese money have 5 different languages. So China is going to be very international. At least the money is.
Albert,
Okay, yes.
To do with the wealth distribution, I would assume that the lower class would still be largely in the rural areas, but maybe not. Be interesting to know about I think you gave a previous lecture 2 or 3 years ago about the enormous migration from the farms to the cities. And that's probably escalating all the time, but it'd be interesting to know that breakdown of rural to sort of urban, suburban type living.
Yeah. Yes. No, as I said before, the eastern provinces provide a higher salary compared with those in the west, in the inland, and therefore a lot of farmers, workers, okay, anyone, not necessarily farmers, will have to give up their lives in their local area for a number of years in order to work, and therefore we have a social problem called left behind children. Sometimes both parents left their rural area and work in the cities somewhere in the East Coast and left the children to be looked after by their grandparents, and sometimes look after themselves. So that is a social issue. And one of the major problem Chinese government want to solve is this left behind children. They want the children to be able to at least stay with their parents. But that will put a lot of stress on the social system in the wealthy provinces in the coast. And therefore, Chinese have this so-called okay, which is, for example, I'm born in Melbourne. Okay, let's say I'm born in Melbourne, then I have a wuhao in Melbourne. Okay, and with my wuhao in Melbourne, when I go to, for example, in Sydney, I won't get the same social service as the people in Sydney. Now that is the Chinese system at the moment, and China want to eliminate this system so that a Melbourneian going to Sydney have the same social service as the people born in Sydney. So that it's the same for Sydney people who are born in Sydney, come to Melbourne here, will have the same social service. But to do that, then the stress on the existing system is huge. So they have to increase the ability of the more populous cities first. And that takes time. And therefore, at the moment, they're trying to remove that. And eventually, at the moment, actually, the Chinese rural area is becoming more and more attractive, even to the well-educated. And a very large number of university graduates actually choose to go to a rural area to work and make their living, partly because of the property price. For example, if we are trying to get a real estate, a flat, for example, in Shanghai, we will be looking about 3 to 4 million Australian dollars for a flat. But if you move to a second tier city, that will drop to about $1 million Australian dollars per flat. But you move to a third tier, that will drop to about 500,000. So for example, in Urumqi, which is the capital of Xinjiang, a typical accommodation there is about 100,000 Australian dollars at the moment. It's quite affordable at the moment. So a lot of university graduates, if they have during their education met somebody from Urumqi or from Xinjiang, and they come up with a good idea, we are seeing a lot of these entrepreneur, educated persons going into the third, fourth tier cities to start their adventure. That's happening, but not on a large scale. And I think that will be useful later on to help China to really have a common prosperity.
Albert, I'm interested about the rural areas because I'm off a farm in New South Wales originally, and when my wife and I went to China about 2016, I was very disappointed on the buses, long distances between the main cities we went to, meaning Suzhou, Wuchao, and Hangzhou.
It is much better now. Yes, when I first time go to China, I was very disappointed as well. That was in the 80s. Yes, in the 80s when I traveled with my wife to China. That was our first time. Starting from Hong Kong, which is a city, okay, a highly developed city, and my first stop is Canton or Guangzhou, which is good, but it's already looking much like the rural area in Hong Kong, in the middle of the city. Then our next stop is Shanghai. At that time, we are not feeling so well about China. And then by the time we are in Beijing, we still see cattle pulling carts at that time. So to us, it's a shock. But now it's different. It's very modernized.
Like when we went, there was these huge tree breaks each side of the freeways, highways, that you couldn't see the farms at all. But one Chinese lady at U3A told me the reason might be that the country's very over-farmed over thousands of years, and the soil erosion is very bad, and maybe the government doesn't want you to see the farms because of that. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, soil destruction or dirt destruction is a huge problem everywhere. But they are now trying to rebuild that upper layer soil, which is critical. Yes, I think next year in our series, I might like to do one session on the modern agriculture in China. People interested?
Yes, thank you very much. That's great.
Yeah, okay. I will do one. Now, for next week, we talking about the Chinese zero tolerance on the COVID. And then the week after next is the Chinese space program. So this will be this year. And then next year, I will continue with this series. Every term, I will try to provide 3 different presentations. And the next terms, I can give you a little bit idea of what I'm going to talk about next term. Let me just find this. I have this. Okay. Open it up. 2020, term 1, focus on Hong Kong. So I will be talking about the national security law and the Patriots rules Hong Kong and the effects. And then the second presentation will be on the integration of Hong Kong into China's 14th five-year plan. And thirdly, the United Kingdom has allowed some Hong Kong people to migrate there. So I will be looking at the Hong Kongers in United Kingdom. So that will be the first term. The second term, I will be looking at Chinese archaeological finds. The first one will be on the terracotta warriors. The second one will be on the oldest musical instruments of ancient China. And then the third one is one of the archaeological sites, which has produced a lot of very good finds in the last 2 years. The Sanxing Dui, I will talk about that. So third term, I will talk about the agricultural industry as one of them. Then I will continue thinking of. So if you want me to talk about something, please give me some suggestions. I'm happy to include them in future presentations.
Albert, I've got a suggestion, if I may.
Yes, please.
I just since COP26 is in the middle of its couple of weeks at the moment, and because there has been a little bit of movement around the world, even in Australia, on activities to deal with climate change and adjusting emissions targets and so on, and even there was a little bit of a subtle move from China, I just thought it might be a really good time, if you felt like it, of including a little bit in the next week or so on China's position with regard to climate change and its emissions targets. I think it just had a subtle change of saying that it went from aiming for peaking by around 2030 to intending to peak before 2030.
Yeah.
And I think it's maintaining its 2060 for net zero, but you might be able to shed some more light on the Chinese position.
Yeah, they also say they want to achieve zero emissions before 2060.
Before 2060, which is great, yeah.
So both the two terms has now changed to before.
Before, great, yeah.
As you say, a subtle change. Another commitment Chinese has made recently is they are not going to fund any more fossil fuel projects outside.
That's only externally.
Only externally, yes, correct.
Yeah, they still the biggest carbon coal-fired power generators in the world.
Yeah.
Although they're also the biggest renewable energy generators in the world.
Well, China is the most populous country in the world as well. And that is exactly why they face a different kind of problem from us. For example, we have only about 20-something million people, but they have 1.4 billion. So their problem is much bigger.
Yes.
Some people say a sneeze from every Chinese is a big problem. Yeah, good question. I will include that. And then if I will look it down here, and then let me see our third. Okay, I will either do this next time or the third time. Okay. Okay, I will.
Yeah, it'd be a great time while COP's on to have just a little bit on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. No problem. Okay. So thank you everybody for coming, and we'll see you.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Albert. Have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Albert.
Thanks, Albert. Really good.